Okay, I think we're good. Okay, I'd like to call tonight's finance meeting for Monday, August 25th to order. It is 5:36 PM. All five members are present. First off, review and approve minutes.
My apologies, it did not make it to the packet in time. See you next week.
Okay, so we'll review minutes on the next one. Next, we have opening for public comment. Anybody wishing to speak? They come up to the front.
I have a few tonight. We'll start
We-
with Luke,
Oh,
Luke Hensley.
your name is good enough, sir.
I'll say I'm in the district eight. So I'll give a brief disclaimer. I'm here as both an employee and citizen of. There we go. Brief disclaimer, I'm here as both an employee and citizen of Watertown on my own accord. I don't represent the feelings of anyone else and should also be clear that my opinion is not representative of or related to the police union, since we have one that's in negotiation. Sorry for the uniform, but I'm working and using my 30-minute lunch to be here. I also apologize if I have to abruptly leave. And finally, be clear, I'm not an expert on anything about to say, just want to give my opinion because I truly enjoy living in Watertown and love working here. I'm asking the finance committee to take a serious, unbiased, not a, that's what we've always done, look at not participating in the expenditure restraint incentive program, ERIP, for a year to be able to support growth that the current budget cannot. Mr. Stevensmore can fact check me on anything I'm about to say after I'm done. In the nearly 11 years that I've lived and worked in Watertown, I believe we have qualified for ERIP every year, and to my knowledge, even before that. This program is great, and I understand by personally following along with the budget process that what we get back is important. It's also important in that it encourages local government to spend conservatively. But I also understand the program is based on the previous year's budget, meaning we have self-imposed a decades plus old budget minus the slight allowable inflation factor plus a valuation factor based on growth in municipal property values for a city that is not what it was decades ago. I'm happy to see business growth, the previous, current, and future housing developments, and the many future plans. But that growth means more services that need to be provided by the city across all departments. The current way we've always done it, 0% increased budget, sticking to the ERIP qualifications simply doesn't support that, in my opinion. While I appreciate and understand the city has financial obligations, need for safety net, and need to complete the budget while considering sustainability, longevity, and responsibility to the citizens, I feel a need to remind everyone that we are not a for-profit entity. Taxes do not get collected to make large stagnant accounts. I've seen the city struggle with staffing almost my entire 11 years here, and most of it seems due to salaries and or the fact that employees here handle so much workload, which then gives them incredible skills and experience that cities, to include in the area, will pay them more for. I've seen a struggle to maintain and or hire a street superintendent, fire chief, city engineers, firefighters, police officers, city attorneys, IT personnel, and more. And that's just kind of the key leadership. We also seem to have a lower than wanted retention rate of employees in general. The employees that serve the city are an incredible group of people across all departments. And to the finance committee's interest in doing a position review, I would highly encourage this, but I think rather than making any cuts, there will be a deeper appreciation for how much everyone does with limited resources and personnel across all departments. I'm suggesting the city council budget with the intent not to qualify for the ERIP, at least for the next year, and spend a little more than normal. Take care of employees and implement the pay study. Well compensated employees typically result in greater retention, which saves money. It's highly costly to constantly post positions, run interviews and background checks, hiring processes, and then train new employees. Add the much needed positions to alleviate strain and burnout, allow us to better serve the citizens and get some projects done and have happier citizens. Then the following budget with the intent to qualify for ERIP. But now it's my understanding you will have a qualify under a new higher ceiling budget, allowing you more flexibility in that budget with a higher return from ERIP, one that likely reflects the size of the city and services needed. There is no penalty to leave or rejoin other than the non-payment, because it's not a leave or rejoin program. It's just a did you qualify or didn't you program, as outlined in the statute covering it. Growth requires chances and being uncomfortable, but this is a unique opportunity where this chance would enable you to do great things for the city and the people that serve the community. And your finance director is saying that the math checks out, so the risk is even less. If you don't, I'm curious what the long-term plan for the accumulated surplus money from taxes, which has been projected to continue growing, is. If it is to continue to accumulate more with a constant, that's always how we've done it, 0% increase, I would assume a reduction in taxes is on the horizon. I truly appreciate the work of everyone and appreciate the seriousness of the budget process. But I ask that before you simply say, no, we're uncomfortable with that, we can't give up the ERIP money, that you take a critical look at what's possible if you were to step away for a year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa Schwartz.
My name is Lisa Schwartz, Human Resources with the City of Watertown. I'm one of the positions created in the last 6 years that I've been asked to identify by committee members to be cut in item 4E. I want to point out that the Finance Committee has not hesitated to approve items like 4A, 4B, and 4C, awarding raises to individuals that are part of Public Works Commission that have been here for less than 2 years. But today, in item 4E, you're asking general fund employees to beg for their jobs. It's a choice to be angry and upset. It's a choice to be hopeful and caring. In my role with the city, I am all of these. Our general fund employees don't expect to get rich in a public service position, but they are being asked to perform with less while still caring for their families. Citizens demand public bathrooms and toilet paper and ridicule purchasing tires for equipment. 0 increases in the budget when inflation continues affect our city operations. Citizens want more services, but for less wages. Our employees want an employer they can be proud to serve that values safe communities. Our employees are worth a fair wage. Not passing this pay study in full will feed discontent and further feelings of being mistreated by you, our governing officials. In my 5 years, our employees have been aggressively pursued for their knowledge and their care for our citizens. Being proud of your employer is what keeps them working with us. Your job is to pay them fairly and provide them with the tools they need. If you won't do that with the funds that are available, then you need to reduce the burdens that are expected from them that the citizens are unwilling to pay. Since June, this conversation has caused anguish amongst our staff. You are aware of the conversations that happen when employees leave. The stigma can't be fought with hopes and good wishes. It's equally difficult to sell new candidates on values of a community where they read the headlines in the newspaper. In Matthew 25, the parable of the 3 servants, it is the third servant that hid the wealth entrusted to him by his master and was proud of it, that was chastised for not investing in the master's behalf. I trust that you will see the responsibility that you have to invest the money that's already been collected from the citizens into the city and the employees. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Stacy Winkleman.
Stacy Winkleman, I'm the Operations Manager for the Public Works Street and Solid Waste Division. I'd like to start by saying that I understand the difficult task you have ahead of you, and I appreciate you listening to alternative ideas when it comes to the annual budget. You have a gift in the form of your finance director, and I encourage you to trust his knowledge and ideas, as well as all the department and division leaders who work hard every day to continue to provide services of all forms to the citizens of Watertown. I've heard it said that every budget year is hard, sometimes harder than the last. This is very true, but I believe that is because to stay within constraints, we are continually pushing things off to the next year or the year after that. This creates a snowball effect and we will always continue to be behind. In recent years, leadership has really focused on recruiting and retaining employees. This is no easy task when starting wages are lower than average and there is always a possibility of no annual raise. I personally strive to have the division I manage be one that employees like to come to every day, or at least don't wake up dreading coming to. I can only do so much. Staff needs to know that budgets can support wage increases. There is no cushion or fluff in our budget. I watch our budgets extremely closely, and our employees and I spend a lot of time making sure we are getting the best prices on parts and supplies. Employees make sure to ask before purchasing so I know what is being spent, and because things are tight this time of year, I must prioritize purchases so budgets don't go over. City departments are asked year after year to stay at 0% increase. The world is not staying at a 0% increase. Items we use every day, just in normal operating procedures, keep increasing, yet we are trying to maintain the same budgets. Our spending limits need to be raised on all levels, not just in certain areas. I am asking you to please consider leaving the expenditure restraint program so surplus funds can be used to increase spending levels. Thanks.
Thank you.
Tanya Runyon.
Good evening. Last year was my first budget season with the city in a leadership position, and I'll be honest, I was taken aback when the response to department heads was often delay or cut. We were told to do more with less, even as inflation drives costs up across every line in the city budget. Replacing critical equipment gets pushed back, which only increases maintenance costs and risk to staff and citizens. We spend more time patching and repairing than working effectively. When I say we, I'm not speaking specifically about the fire department. I have been seeing it at the streets and the parks department as well. The truth is, we don't have the luxury to delay anymore. Acting upstream today prevents problems from piling up and avoids a much bigger cost tomorrow. Everything costs more now. EMS supplies, cleaning supplies, salt, even as Chief Brower noted last year, bullets do too. For 2026, I want to highlight 3 critical needs from my perspective. A fire marshal, a deputy chief of EMS, and to implement the citywide wage study. I come to you not to complain, but to ensure your eyes are open and understanding to the impact it truly has as you make the decisions to cut, eliminate, or delay any requests put forth. Because as Dan Heath wrote in Upstream, you can't fix a problem you cannot see. First, the fire marshal. Right now, we have deficiencies in high-risk properties that go back to 2021. Without a fire marshal, we cannot keep up with the inspections, re-inspections, fire protection permits, and oversight of audits. We have new construction and projects on the city horizon, which is fantastic, but it's going to require technical expertise that no current full-time fire department member has. In recent years, that gap has put us at risk of losing our 2% dues. That's over $100,000 a year. And while I'm committing resources to preventing that cut from happening, it takes enormous time in pulling our current deputy chief away from the critical operational duties. We can only carry so much. Beyond revenue, it's about safety. One preventable fire downtown or an industrial property could cost us, the city, millions in damage and liability. We had a fire downtown this summer, and I would say we were nothing short of lucky that it was caught early and our line staff were exceptionally efficient that evening. Prevention is always less expensive than a disaster. And frankly, our prevention ordinances and abilities are outdated. We do not adequately cover fire escapes, food trucks, solar panels, and so many more things that need our eyes. A fire marshal will help us bring into compliance and help keep the citizens and the city protected. Second, the deputy chief of EMS. It makes up 70 to 75% of our workload, and yet leadership capacity hasn't kept pace. This role would ensure compliance, training, and quality oversight, all of which are critical in a heavily regulated environment like EMS. While the city's population has gone down over 1,000 people in the last decade, our fire and EMS call volume has gone up by 1,000 calls. We are not privileged to be able to say less people, less calls. We have an aging population in an aging city that needs additional support, and it's not just from our department. We're seeing strong returns of our EMS operations. Ambulance billing exceeded projections by more than $100,000 more in revenue. Our administrative assistant, who shouldn't have to do this work, completed the reporting for GEMT, or Ground Emergency Transport billing. Thankfully, it paid off, and we can expect $200,000 from our 2023 and 2024 reporting. But in order to keep receiving this funding, we must submit accurate reports annually. EMS financial assistance plan has increased, but only if we keep our operational plan current, which is overdue and out of date and has another time-sensitive task added to my workload as a service director. Without dedicated leadership, we risk falling behind in compliance, missing out on funding opportunities, and stretching our current command staff too thin. Right now, we're constantly reacting, putting out fires that aren't flames, but still pull us away from operational priorities and even family time. That cycle isn't sustainable, and only upstream investments can break it. Finally, the third is the wage study. This is not about fire and EMS. It affects the entire city workforce. The study shows that Watertown staff are underpaid compared to our neighbors. Just last year, we promoted a lieutenant to battalion chief, but under the current scale, that promotion would have been a large pay cut. The compression clause prevented it, but now he makes the same as a long-serving fire chief or battalion chief. Let me ask you how this is fair to those who have served in those positions for many years. A slow phased response just leaves us behind once again by the time a full wage study is implemented. Turnover is expensive. We've had plenty of that in the past. To hire and train a new fire employee, it is at least $30,000. And that's just for the initial onboarding, startup, and not the cost of the full training it takes to take years to get them up to speed. Don't give staff across the city a reason to leave and take our investment with them. In closing, they are not optional expenses, they are essentially investments. The fire marshal protects both lives and revenue. The deputy chief of EMS safeguards compliance and keeps outside funding flowing into Watertown. The wage study supports every department in retaining the staff that we rely heavily on. If we delay again, we are not saving money. We are increasing risk and future cost. We have an opportunity right now to strengthen our safety, compliance, and fiscal responsibility for Watertown. And I urge you to support these initiatives in the 2026 budget, as it's showing your support for the community we all serve together.
Tim Hayden.
Tim Hayden, Assistant Manager for the water systems here in Watertown. These are my thoughts and opinions. I'm not representing like my entire department or whatever, but just want to say that at our last council meeting, when discussing the warming and cooling shelter, several council members stated how important it is to allow the city's experienced and well-trained staff to make decisions and recommendations, and that the council should trust those recommendations, and I agree with that principle. That is why I ask, why should the council trust the experience of the staff on one issue, but not on another? In this case, the finance director, who is the expert on the city's finances, is recommending that the city step out of expenditure restraint for 1 year and make use of a portion of our very large fund balance. If we trust that the fire chief or the police chief on their professional recommendations, why should we not trust the finance director on his? I also looked into this question further. I used ChatGTP and asked it to examine Act 12, expenditure restraint, and our current city fund balance of 32.8%. Specifically, I asked whether spending down the fund balance from 32.8% to 25% would be a smart financial decision. The result was yes. It can be a financially sound move when the funds are used to implement wage study results, add staff, modernize equipment, and facilities. That is exactly the position Watertown is in today. We also need to remember the investment that has already been made. The city spent a significant amount of money and staff time to complete the wage study. If we do not fully implement it, we will see increased turnover and a serious decline in employee morale. Taxpayers in Watertown have been taxed to provide services, not to watch their dollars sit in the bank collecting interest. Expenditure restraint prevents us from putting those funds to work. As a department head, it is my professional recommendation that the city take 1 year hiatus from expenditure restraint. Doing so will allow us to implement the full wage study, invest in the staff who provide essential services, and fund long-needed infrastructure improvements. This is a financially responsible step that puts our resources back into serving the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone online, I believe I gave you the chance to unmute yourself. If you want to say anything, you may. Do it right. So. And check down mute. Okay. After our last meeting, I'm kind of hesitant on what I do on here, so.
Looks like chat is still active. So I guess
That's a no, okay. That's making
well,
sure.
I'd feel good if, like one of the remote attendees at least said that they can hear us and said they
Can,
don't want to speak. Just haven't seen anything. But
I
there's
can-
Greg, there's
I
Zach.
can hear you.
okay, thanks, Zach. I was making sure. Okay, thanks, Lisa. No, just making sure. For some reason, I'm more hesitant on unchecking things than I was a couple weeks ago.
I do not blame you.
I can leave those two. An issue with. All right, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to business then. A, review and take possible action, approve one-step adjustment for wastewater division employee.
All right, thank you. Following the guidance in our employee handbook and policy on steps for certifications, I have three separately before you tonight. Jake Niels on our wastewater team has passed his test for, let me get to Jake. His total phosphorus removal. So Jake has now qualified after passing his test. So I'd like to recommend approving him moving up from grade H step 8 to grade H step 9, moving retroactive to the beginning of this pay period, which was last Wednesday.
I'll move for adoption.
Motion by Berg. Second by Smith. Okay, any further discussion? Ms. Davis?
I have a question.
Yes.
For Mr. Niels, when was he hired? What year was he hired?
Jake, that's a great question. He's in his second year.
So
Looking at Lisa,
2023?
yes.
And how many steps has he moved through since 2023?
For the certifications, 1, counting, 2, 3, 4, this would be 5.
And in contrast, so he's done 5 steps in 2 years.
Correct.
So I'm curious, in contrast, and maybe this is a question for you, Lisa, how long would it take a typical staff member to move through 5 steps? You might need to go there.
Well, I'll let her answer, then I have some more follow-up for you on that. These are special certifications and steps that are required for the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources for
Yeah.
water and wastewater employees, very specific to the types of processes that we run here in the city of Watertown.
So how long would it take another staff member to move through 5 steps?
I've been hired since 2020 and you've approved a step every year except in 2022 when we did a reevaluation. So the last 4 years, potentially 4 steps.
So for you personally, 4 steps? Is that what you're saying?
Without the adjustment that we did with the salary structure.
Okay, so 4 years, 1 step per year. And this is, so for this individual, would they have gotten their yearly step plus the certification steps? So maybe a total of,
So you can exceed a regular year of a merit pay due to this. I do want to point out that these employees that are for you, before you getting these steps, we're hiring them without the qualifications we need, part and due to qualified applicants not applying for jobs that have the certifications because we can't pay those wages. So we're hiring people with a great skill set that we spend a lot of time training to learn the job and then provide them an opportunity with these tests and certifications to move up on the pay scale, which has been helping us retain these employees. We have lost many. This is one of the first times I've had my staff fully employed here. If I'm going through a turnover rate that's been a nightmare. I'm on close to 40 different fillings of positions in my 8 years.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Peter, I think your department and wastewater, I think they have more certification requirements maybe than some other departments as far as the basic duties of what we expect of them. I just know within maybe Park and Rec and Street Department that they have clear duties when they get hired. Their ability to move up obviously is there, but not to the level and because of the requirements that maybe are in place for your type of work.
That would be correct from my understanding. We also use this as in the offer letter for our newest employee. We had provided an opportunity explaining these steps for certifications. That employee asked for more money up front, and we denied that request because they didn't have the experience we were looking for. But we also offered this opportunity for them to see advancement within the job after they learned the job as we're trying to train them into that job.
Yeah. I think that's perfect.
I have a follow-up question. Will this particular person, just using him as example, Mr. Niels, will he at some point cap out on the certification?
Yes, he will.
Qualify for?
Yes, as part of our pay study, we identified the employees eligible for steps and like how many. So a water department employee is only eligible for up to 3 or 4, depending on which role they're in. The wastewater ones are broken out a little bit more into plant operations, have more opportunity versus a maintenance group. And as you work in different parts of the wastewater facility. So yes, you can't keep going. You do max out depending on your job title. And so when we did the new pay study, we looked very closely at that. We did come to a conclusion that we keep this in there. However, certain employees can get 2 or 4, and there's a total of 9 that we want our operations foreman and the lab manager to have all of those so that we're covered on that part of the plant operation. So not everybody is opened up to every single certification that's available.
Proctored exams?
I'm sorry?
Are they proctored exams?
So these all go through the Wisconsin DNR.
Do
So
they have to go to a testing site?
yes, they go to a testing site. We send them to classes and training through the year. And then you go to a training site, which is becoming clearer now than it was during COVID. It was all online, and now it's back to in person 2 times a year in the spring and the fall. So that kind of changes with DNR a little bit. But yes, they have to go to the class and they have to pass the test. And they don't come before you without passing the test. And if they don't pass the test, they pay for that.
And I'm just curious because I do this in my day job, but there's someone watching them take tests. So it's
Yeah,
accountability.
they're in a room
A
and there's an
testing.
instructor
Okay.
there.
I was just curious. Thank you.
Yep, and they have a multiple choice test. They don't have the answers.
Yeah.
They have to pass the test. And some of them are quite difficult. And it takes sometimes up to a year or 2 to feel comfortable to take some of these tests as they get more technical. And they were all rewritten recently, so they're very, if you're not in the field and you're starting out new, like a lot of our employees, this is all brand new for them, and they take some time and go to the training. And once you get a certification, you have to maintain that by continuing education. So if you get the certification, you got to keep the certification. If you let it lapse, then you can't come back here and get it back again.
I do have one more question. I'm so sorry. What's to keep them from transferring out now that they have these marketable skills and they can, as you suggest, get paid more somewhere else?
Well, we're still doing with that right now. So
So
we
we're-
have been building a culture, we feel, in the utilities where we have, been pretty picky, and Lisa can attest to that, on the people that we're bringing in to make sure that they fit, and hopefully provide them an opportunity to further their skill set and we want to hold on to them. So every employee is a risk at leaving, especially these that are getting these certifications and go out. You know, these jobs are out there, and communities nearby are paying more for the same people. So we're doing our best, Tim and I, with our team, to provide them a working environment where they want to stay.
Thank you.
Sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
Ken's point, we do have this type of a program for our other departments where our streets and our parks individuals need CDLs.
Yeah, I know.
We aren't able to pay them for that because it's not in our budget. Our city forester needs certifications, hazmat and pesticide with our parks department. Our city clerk goes in and they get their certification. So we don't have the ability in the general fund to support this type of a program that the utilities has. But there are certifications out there. Our city clerk can't do their job without it.
Your points. Your point's well taken, Lisa, but this is an enterprise fund and this is a different type of a budget they work with, and I understand, and that's obviously an area for improvement based on the point you made. But what I liked with Pete's comment though is that he's trying hard to create a culture within his work area that makes it conducive and rewards people for their ability to obviously hopefully stay long-term and to create that relationship so that they're working as a team for the improvements that are needed within that department and for our city. And I think the culture is what we always did have in Watertown, which is why a lot of people, when you look at the history of our employees, many of them stayed long-term for a lot of reasons, and it wasn't money. It was because of the combination of factors that they enjoyed at the place they worked at. We need to keep working to improve that culture. Obviously, we need to work on the money issues that you're raising tonight, and I'm confident we will address it in our own way. But I do believe that that's an important variable that gets downplayed, and money gets accentuated as far as fixing the problem. It's clearly a big factor, but there's a lot of people that come to an employment situation and enjoy it, and they make that their home, and they stay here for their career. And we want that if we can with people.
Okay. Berg,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
aye. Davis, Lampy.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Next B, review and take possible action, approve one-step adjustment for wastewater division employee.
The same here with Jay Perkle on the wastewater team. Has recently passed another test for Jay. This would be his third. Basic solids separation, which has to do with our biosolids processing and running the centrifuge dewatering process at wastewater. So I'm looking for approval to give Jay Perkle one step. He's currently at grade F, step 7, moving to grade F, step 8, pending approval. Same being retroactive to the beginning of the current pay period that we are in right now.
Mr. Smith,
Move to approve the recommendation of
Okay.
moving Mr. Perkle from grade F, step 7 to grade F, step 8.
okay, second by Berg. Any further discussion on that one? Okay, Smith,
Aye.
aye. Davis,
Aye.
Lampy,
Aye.
Berg.
Aye.
Thank you. All right. C, review and take possible action, approve two-step adjustment for water systems employee.
So what we have here is our third one. This is our water systems operator, one of the employees that was in that new group that was approved last fall this year. So Peter is our water systems operations, like the mechanic, who also is the backup plant operator. So these are Mr. Brunner's first two of his eligible steps for groundwater and distribution for the drinking water system. So before you tonight, I have a request to have Mr. Peter Brunner adjusted from grade J step 2 up to a grade J step 4, steps being retroactive to August 20th, the current pay period beginning date.
Well, Bert,
I made a motion
Yep,
to approve
okay.
that recommendation by our Peter.
yep, motion by Berg. Second by Smith. Okay, any further discussion on that one?
What's the longevity of this individual with your employment?
Peter's been with us for about a year. Yep, right about 1 year. Again, we brought him in with a skill set we felt was useful for the type of work. Peter has a couple more opportunities. It has taken him about a year to get these two. These are two of the very important ones for water, with the groundwater distribution. So we hope that Pete continues to advance and, stay with our team here. He's been doing a really great job for us.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, Smith?
Aye.
I'm sorry, I was looking at the other one. Sorry, I believe Berg, you made the motion, I believe, right?
I did, yeah.
I'm sorry, Berg,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
aye, Davis, Lampy.
Aye.
I apologize for that.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you. All right, moves on to D, Fund 1 income statement through July 2025.
Looking at pages 11 and 12, this is the income statement for Fund 1 through July. So you're about 7 12 months or just shy of 60% of the year. Just a couple of comments. The second and third rows, intergovernment shared taxes and state grants. Just to bring to your attention, that first row looks awfully low at 30%. The majority of that comes in the month of November. So we're tracking what I anticipate to have come in through this period of time. It's just the check doesn't come until November. And then on the third, just to bring that to your attention as well, intergovernment state grants, the bulk of that comes in quarterly payments. And so that's why it is where it is at that 72%. I expect that it'll be the full 100 by the end of the year. I don't have many comments on the expenditures. Everything seemed to be in line. This is the time of the year that I'm starting to interact with our department heads when I see things that are over budget in particular accounts. So they'll bring them to my attention, or I'll bring them to their attention. Miscellaneous, just so you understand, is the contingency line. So that 83,700, we'll never have anything spent on that. If you're looking for a number there, it's that we would move budget from that account to another account if necessary. And we have not yet moved any contingency funds yet this year, but that's not abnormal because the first half of the year, I don't usually have much for that. So just looking at page 12, just a highlight to bring to your attention in case you hadn't seen this. Under each of the subcategories, I've got a percent of total expense so that you understand of that division, that department, or the combination of departments, like at the top of the page, public safety, 51.2% is the current year to date of the total spending for all accounts. And then the current year budget of 51.2%. In this case, it's the same number, but that's the total budget for all of the accounts. So in the example of public safety, that's effectively 51% of all that we spend on general fund. Just to bring to your attention, that's why I've got those percentages under each of those categories. I have no other comments to relate to you, but open to any questions that you might have for me.
Mark, with our payment plan for property taxes, by the end of July, aren't all the taxes to be paid by that time?
Wishful thinking. If
No,
you,
I know, I see the percentage there.
Yeah, the highlight of there, let me just, good question, Ken. And the answer is that in reality, in January, we post 100% of what the tax bills are going to be. The amount that's left outstanding there are some additional taxes, and the predominant one is an internal transfer of the pilot payment from the water utilities to the taxes. And that's actually a journal entry that's done at the end of the fiscal year. And also at the end of year, most of that 974 then would be collected through that pilot transfer from water utilities to general fund.
Okay. And then within just your awareness of property owners that are, property tax owners that are obligated to pay taxes, do you see any kind of a number of those property owners who are in their own way that you're aware of that are not making payment yet? Anything where there's delinquent numbers that are concerning or an impact?
So we have, at the end of December, at the end of January, the end of April, and the end of July, shortly after each of those payment periods are ending, we go through a settlement process. Sherry in my office does that work. And we then have to dole out money to the other taxing entities and pay those amounts. What happens after July is that we send the total outstanding to each of the two counties, and it becomes their responsibility from that point forward to do any and all collections. So if we get a payment for any tax bill that's due and it doesn't come to us after that first week of August, we actually forward it to the county or send it back saying, sorry, you don't owe it to us now, you owe it to the county instead.
Yep, and I understand that procedure. That's why I'm just know that there's an awful lot of properties in Watertown that have high assessments, and based on that, they pay a lot of taxes. And I just don't know, whether there's anything about that that formula of high taxes based on high value that's contributing to maybe a larger number of property owners that are falling behind and not making payment. But we don't have that information.
No, I don't have that in front of me. I'd be glad to take a look at it. The top of my head, most of what is unpaid are not the expensive properties, the expensive bills. Those are typically paid. In fact, most of the time, those are paid in December before the year has ended and all. But I'd have to look, and then I'd want to do a comparison for you to a year before, just to see, how is that one way
How
or
it
the other.
compares, if it's better or worse.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Sherry's online, so she's heard her assignment.
Yeah.
All right, okay, move on. Page here. All right, next, E, discuss 2026 budget. This is for me first. Mark, give me a hand.
Yep.
I'll just share screen.
And you want to share this?
I think that right there is fine. Thanks.
So hit the share.
Thumbs up. Actually, I gotta show that quick. That former third grade student of mine just sent this to me like an hour ago. She lost her mom to brain cancer. One of the people in that picture is no longer with us. That was my second year working at church teaching third grade. Oh. I don't like that. Make it bigger this way, I'll make it work. All right. I thought you guys have the numbers. I think Mr. Stevens put quite a bit in the packet. I was kind of highlighting a few things here, so. Put some costs for in front of you. We put the overall costs with benefits and uniforms, computer, everything on. So cost for fire marshal, police captain, and police admin assistant. And then like there was two requests for 2 officers, and on last Tuesday, I talked about the need for 4 to move first shift to have a minimum of 4 officers on, and then move into 6 more officers to also be able to have a minimum of 4 officers on third shift. I've been awakened multiple times, even this past Saturday, early in the morning, by Mr. Brower. Even in Watertown, sometimes bad things happen. Apologize, it's looking a little different here, but with Stan ERP, that 608,000 is pretty accurate. That could vary a little bit here or there, how much money we're going to get between our 3% increase and what comes from the state. Some of the money already being allocated. The fire union was approved last year. It was a police union that's on negotiation now. And we put depending on the police union, that could potentially go up or down a little bit. That's got to be negotiated yet. Health insurance, that could sway a little bit, but that's a pretty good projection of the numbers we have right now. That leaves us with 84,439 left total. That's all we got for this year. I even asked Mr. Stevens about health insurance, like, could you increase something, and the amount you'd save isn't worth it all. That's what you play with. And I'm guessing even the cost of salt alone is going to eat half of that up, so. Last year, the finance committee approved to have a pay study, and we paid $30,000 for. And the goal was to be in the middle of the area, not Brookfield. So if you took 20 communities, Watertown include one of them, we're right in the middle. That was the goal the finance committee made last year. If you want to implement that pay study, it's going to cost $993,000. That's to get people in the grades and the steps. To be able to put them just in a grade, which means they'd be in the starting range and then honoring step 1, it's the cost of $434,000. Mr. Stevens had a plan to implement half of it or so. So if somebody was behind $6 an hour, they would get $3 an hour in half of it, plus the 2.75%, I believe, Mr. Stevens, correct? Yeah.
The 2.75 would be inclusive of trying to get them to that right place. So for some people, it might mean that their grade step on the new pay study is about where they belonged. But we tried to incorporate in specific numbers about 2.69% CPI for cost of living. We upped it to 2.75 just as a round number so that we could make sure that everybody would see a raise this year. And also the minimum increase would be 2.75.
You want to finish? You can go first, Mr. Lampy. You got a question for Mr. Stevens?
Well, I just noted that the number here, the 993 that we're looking at, this represents under the McGrath option that we've been looking at for about 3 months now, the 10.86% option.
That's correct.
Plus the union?
No.
No.
This is the employees that are not on utility and non-union.
So the 993 would include all non-union, including.
Sorry, that'd be
utilities.
utilities too, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, non-union.
And I'll probably, I would say expanding it beyond anybody that gets paid out of Fund 1. I've got listed on that sheet from prior meetings. So you're talking about wastewater, water, library, environmental health, emergency preparedness, stormwater, solid waste, Seal a Smile, and Town Square.
Those are different.
So all of those people are included in the total of the 993.
Right, but they're not part of Fund 1.
Correct, they're not.
That's right. Okay.
Go on, Mr. Berg. Yeah.
No, I know we're gonna have a good discussion here on this topic, and I think what we need to do is look back, and I know that Alderperson Smith is gonna come in here with more clarification and amplify the point that was made by him. But in the end, one of the things that he highlighted, and that I think there's been some looking into, and that is the topic of 100% of our workforce being counted, with the reality that there's many examples over the course of a year where that does not come into play and there's a savings and it accumulates into our fund balance. And over time, it helps explain why we consistently add to it in a healthy way, making it a large fund balance, which we can't really access without it impacting on an expenditure restraint program the way we would like to. So going back to his point, which he's going to, I'm sure, amplify and point out, there's incredible money that is going to be available for us each year going forward for us to address some of the needs that are in the budget and that are being highlighted by the mayor and the people that came in front of us. 3% instead of 100%, if I understood, is going to have a savings citywide in that Fund 1 type budget of maybe $600,000. If you have numbers like 600,000, and we're allowed 607,000 from our finance director to stay within expenditure restraint program. So between the two, we've got the potential of having over $1 million that we can address our needs and still stay within the fund, within our expenditure restraint guidelines.
Where's the million dollars?
607,000 right now is what we're allowed to spend.
Right.
And I'm saying that because we have been doing consistently 100% of counting positions when they really don't, at the end of the year, have that impact on an expenditure, they end up being less than 100%. And that type of a savings over time and over the citywide type of has a very significant effect of saving hundreds of thousands of dollars for our city that we can have to use going forward with a different approach on calculating our positions. And that is an incredible savings. And I just appreciate deeply his looking into that and realizing that that's a potential area of savings we can benefit from that will fix our problems to a large degree and allow us to spend still within a reasonable type of expenditure and address more than we were previously allowed to. And it's a blessing. And I knew about it. I didn't think about the impact, but I started after his point that he made at our meeting on Tuesday. We have people like Mason Becker who came and he's gone. And we are going to fill that position, but until we do, there's a savings. We had our city attorney who left, and we are going to have a new one coming in. But that gap in between, those are the areas, and it happens consistently each year for different people for different reasons. But the effect of it is hundreds of thousands of dollars that we can actually have available. And those dollars can help us to address some of our needs to still stay within the expenditure restraint. And I wanted to highlight that point. I'm sure that Alderman Smith can maybe go way beyond my point of making it, but we have a solution right here.
So like when the police and fire, we don't have a spot filled, those guys get paid time and a half. And they wind up working a lot of hours,
Yeah.
like back to back 12-hour shifts. They finished my presentation.
Your point's well taken. There's an example of where you might have an additional cost, but what you see consistently, we've seen it at the Fund 1 budget, the general fund, consistently puts money into our fund balance, and we're asking why. And Alderperson Smith looked at that as an example and found that it consistently occurs, and it's actually contributing to a fund balance that we benefit from, but we can't use because of how it impacts on expenditure restraint. So if we go forward next year and we do a different approach on our employees and don't do the 100%, but a different number like 96 or 7, and we look at the difference on savings, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars that we'll be able to use and allocate that each year going forward with a different, we won't be contributing to our fund balance like we did before, which is okay. We'll have to have different ways of making it bigger each year, but it is a very good approach to fix some of the problems that you're addressing that we haven't looked at until recently.
But Mayor, I know you want to finish, but I'd like to respond to that point.
So could go ahead, Mr. Stevens.
It's a fantastic idea that I began last year. It's already been incorporated into our budgeting process a year ago. So the year 2025, we have not budgeted 100% of our positions. It was something that I brought to the table. Mayor McFarland questioned me, "Are you sure?" And I said, "The fact is, we don't have 100% occupancy in every seat. I've already incorporated that, Ken, into what the 2025 budget has. That's been done a year ago. We already have that in place for our budget. That's not a new idea. I've already put it in place a year ago."
Tanya? That's good. And how much are we increasing the overtime? Do we decide today? Up 50,000? Okay. Well, we'll send the bills we just paid for the lawyers to somebody else, and evidently we won't pay them. Mr. Smith, go ahead.
Yes, how does the budgeting that you implemented last year in areas of compensation, how does that work? Do you do it as a percentage, or do you individually target positions?
It was an individual target to departments that I saw there was that potential disparity, predominantly in public safety. That was the area where, and they balked at it. You know, Tanya didn't like my idea. Dave didn't like the idea, but the reality is, but I was able to go back to history to say, but this is the way it has been working. We do have lapses in positions, and that's what we can do. Like the position of attorney, though, in the absence of that attorney, we're outsourcing at a much more expensive rate.
Yeah. Okay. I don't think it's going to be particularly productive to try to equate how this process of evaluation carries forward by looking at individual positions. Those are going to vary all over the map. What we can do is we can look at what was budgeted in compensation in a particular budget year, and at the end of that year, how much was paid in compensation. Now, the average of just the last 3 years is $550,000 between those two numbers, between what was budgeted in total compensation and what was paid out in total compensation. And what I had suggested last Tuesday was that we not base major decision-making on a short-term picture, but rather what is the difference, the annual average difference between budgeted compensation and the amount that was paid. And if we did that over 10 years, we would get an average that would give us a remarkably helpful snapshot of whether or not we are budgeting in a way that is realistic. Because if we over budget, we have got a substantial detriment that accrues. Because what happens is, you say, well, that's going to produce a fund balance amount for that year. But the problem is the fund balance doesn't help us in the way that we would think it would help us. In other words, if we budget for the following year a certain amount of anticipated use of the fund balance, we're penalized because that counts against our total expenditures under expenditure restraint. So the point of us having a fund balance, and we have long had a fund balance range and a midpoint goal. One of the things that you mentioned was that there was a $1.6 million amount within the fund balance undesignated between the 32 point a certain percent and the midpoint goal, which is 25%, which is what you said at the last council meeting. Now, what's the risk of doing our best to budget right on the button? In other words, if we find, just for talking's sake, that over the last 10 years, the disparity between budgeted compensation and actually paid compensation averages over a long period, such as 10 years, $500,000, we're over budgeting. And our most advantageous position is to budget exactly what we need. And because averages have overages and unders, there are going to be years when we are going to under budget, if we use that averaging approach, total compensation. The point is, that's why we have 25% of our annual budget set aside in undesignated fund balance to address issues such as that. But what I'm interested in is, have we, so I take my hat off to you to have recognized that that is a factor. But what I'm saying is, it's still a factor, because in the short-term picture, we're talking $500,000 disparity between budgeted amount and expended amount. And I'm suggesting that to the extent that we find that is true over a longer period of time, we can use that to budget in a way. Let's say $500,000 equates to 3%. We under budget the total anticipated costs by 3%, and close that $500,000 gap, disparity, which opens up spending authority under expenditure restraint, because that's not in the budget. And we could then say, okay, because that $500,000 is dropping out, we then have spending capacity to afford significant amount of the pay plan, new hires, and do it while still remaining in expenditure restraint and continuing to receive a substantial amount, between $400,000 and $500,000, depending upon the year, from that expenditure restraint. That's my question. What is the problem with that approach?
I'm welcoming the idea, and I will plan on do it, but I will not go beyond my 3 years here.
Excuse me?
I will not go back beyond my 3 years here. I have no idea how budgeting took place. I wasn't here to oversee that process. To give a 10-year average is false information, because I know what my process is. I know what Sherry, my assistant, does. We scrutinize a whole lot more than I can't respond to what had been the process before me. And also, I'll take your challenge. For 3 years, I feel comfortable that I know what was going on because I was here. And effectively, I was already, because of looking at it, knowing that I should be able to afford $150,000. It was about $160,000 that we have not included in our budget for personnel in those two areas of public safety and all. So I'm glad to revisit it. I didn't go back and look at a 3-year average, but I honestly don't believe there's any value in looking to a 5 or a 10-year average, because I wasn't part of the process to be able to know how definitive their budgeting was on the payroll side of things. I don't know.
Okay, if that's what you think would present a more accurate picture, that would be great. I thought a longer picture would give us a better capacity to anticipate what a future year might result in, having had a more extended picture of the past. But
Yeah.
if you say 3%, 3 years would present a very accurate picture of that phenomenon, that we have a process that is playing out, inevitably will have a capacity to calculate every year. And we want to take a look at that 3-year period of time. But I am interested in trying to gain the information that will allow us to remain on expenditure restraint, open up spending capacity for which we would have very, very little risk in light of the substantial fund balance we have, and be able to do the kinds of things that a number of people have spoken to us about. They're concerned about things we won't be able to do if we don't have the expenditure capacity. And the overriding point being made by many of the speakers is the answer is getting off expenditure restraint. Well, what I want to be sure of is that there isn't some other answer that will give us the capacity to do many of the things that we all want to try to do and not have to take that step.
Mr. Lampe, go ahead.
Mayor, if you don't mind continuing to pursue this topic a little bit more. I think one of the hazards in looking at a straight, let's say 5.53% number off the top is that, our finance director is essentially representing that there is already some of that 550 that we've already recovered. A moment ago, you said that there was about a diversion of about 150, 160 in terms of public safety, in terms of some of the calculations. Was that for each of the public safety areas?
Total.
Total. And then there was an additional diversion for the rest of the employees?
Approximately 40,000.
Okay.
Because those are not as easy to pick on person A, person B. I just didn't have a sense that any other departments were historically short.
Okay. So overall, it sounds like we already have taken about 200,000 of a
Right.
potential number. A part of the conversation that also interested me was basically that discussion between yourself and the mayor in terms of basically allowing that assumption to be baked into the budget. And if I understand my colleagues correctly, they're looking for a more aggressive number to be built into the budget. And so I think we're hovering right now, if I'm just doing the math on the back of my envelope here, we're about 1 1/3% that we're saying we've got a structural vacancy throughout the entire city. And that seems to be born of, the 3 years of history that you've had of this, of the city. And I think that potentially, we could look at a more aggressive number, but I'd really want to see that supported by evidence.
Yeah, we can get the math done right away, tomorrow.
Ms. Davis.
Just looking at it's generally page 31 in the annual budget where you take a look at salaries and compensation. Don't you have a summary statement in the budget? And just going off the numbers that I'm finding, 2023 was in the neighborhood of $600,000 difference in salary and compensation for Fund 1. And then 2024, it's hard to say because I don't see anything that had the actual spending is pending, but that was more in the $700,000 range. So there is significant money if you're just going by the budget, what we're seeing between actual and budgeted in the last couple of years.
And that's consistently occurring. And that has a potential for an incredible savings that could address some of the needs here without looking at the idea of stopping our involvement with expenditure restraint. I think we need to give it a lot of effort and look at it thoroughly before we look at the other options. I mean, we don't want to be derelict in our duties, but I think we have to look creatively outside the box, and this, it has the potential of being significant dollars that we can allocate to next year's budget and still be, staying responsibly, within our expenditures we'd like to have if we can. So I'd like us to look actively at it.
Okay, I'll continue on then. I'm off a little bit, it's been a few minutes, so. I had the next slide for being non-union, kind of, I thought maybe for the other jobs are done. Hopefully that picture on the top right's not my house anytime soon. Is that the right number, Mark? 1.9 million? Okay,
For next year.
yeah, so the new fire station and their interest next year on debt's gonna be $1.9 million that we pay in interest.
That's on all of our debt, not just the fire.
Sorry,
station.
that, I mean, I only said that because this year we didn't have any debt on it, the construction loan, so but next year all our debt combined. I kind of learned this one. I want to give you an example here, something that we're doing. There's a potential to save money in one area, but if it comes out of Fund 1 balance, we potentially won't do that because if we borrow for it, it won't come out of the Fund 1 because we have different funds for it. So this one's real. We're talking about the fire department today. So leasing something, they're potentially going to be paying more for it and having to pay for service. It would be cheaper to have it come out of the Fund 1 balance, but we don't have the money for it. I'll give you a real life scenario here. If you had $400,000 in a savings account, car breaks down. Do you draw the money out of the $400,000 or you take a loan out? Knowing that the money you pay in interest is going to probably exceed what you'd make on interest in the savings account. Because that's exactly what we're doing. I kind of skipped this a little bit. The non-union members, what we have, 63, 18, and 15, we're talking about that before. Those are the employees that are going off the Fund 1 balance. And Pete and Tanya and Mark, I got your picture in here too, sorry. You know, when I see a bunch of squad cars in an area marked off with yellow tape, I wouldn't question what Dave says. I wouldn't think I know more than he does. I know my place. I've always told my students to strive for the best. If my family's in danger, I don't want an average cop. I want the best cop possible. If my house is on fire, I want the best fireman to save my family's life. I always joke with my students that I don't want Aaron Rodgers as a quarterback. I just want an average one. You want the best possible all the time. I hope Pete never calls me about this, but if something like this happens, I'm not going to question what he says. I'm going to do exactly what he tells me to do. That's his expertise. Outside Andrew's office, there's a sign that says, if you need a heart transplant, would you go with the lowest bidder? I'm not going to walk in there and tell a doctor how to do their job. Everyone has their specialty. Sorry, Tanya. It's a good picture. I'll move it on right away. Have their specialty. I don't tell a fireman how to do their job. I'm not going to tell him how to do his job either. That's what we pay him to do. I'll be down a little bit. I wanted to give you guys, I'm gonna sit in my old chair in a little bit. Before any decisions are made, I was listening to council, and Fred had a very good point. He said, only if absolutely necessary. I want to set back myself too. And I get the exact numbers. The 1.6 million that Mark mentioned to me last Tuesday, that's not what we're going to draw. That was to take it down 25%. But give you real numbers. And I wanted this time that I gave you information, like if you find ways you can cut and make things work, I value your opinions. But I'd like you to do it right along with the officers before our next finance meeting. Spend a couple hours with them. I would recommend someone that's got a family or one of the officers, a senior officer's been there for a while. I've done it all the time. I did was on council years ago. Maybe see how things really work. I also encourage you to spend time with dispatch. And not only see all the screens they have to work on, but when a family with a, say, like last Sunday, a woman with 3 small kids comes in and they have to be counselors to those people. Oh, I take my old seat. Miss Augie. Let's see where I start first. The 4 of you. You know, Dana, Jonathan, Ken, and Fred, I put you on finance committee. I have respect for all 4 of you a lot, and actually for all 9 older people. I remember talking to Tony 2 years ago, telling him I was going to run. And I told him I wanted a team, like doing it together in sync. And I'm looking across the room right now. I remember I'm always seeing John David and Ken Spot and Mark Keel in the spot you're sitting right now, Fred. Now, Fred, it's hard for me because I'm always used to seeing you in District 2, but, you know, trying to think things through. Dana, you're always educating yourself. You're constantly researching things and always well prepared for every meeting. Every time I've seen you the last couple of years. Jonathan, willing to meet any citizen about any topic, full of energy and creativity. Always listen to others and make sound decisions. And Ken, Fred, you've known me a long time. Ken, I taught your daughters. Like, talking, and you're running for mayor against John, I think, when I had Chelsea in class. Worked with your brother and taught your niece Molly in class. You've known me for 30 years. Fred, you know me longer, like 35. My parents are at all 3 of your, victory parties, I believe. Mostly because of Jack Tobias, but. I was at the square on Friday, and I was asked, you know, what does it take to be a good alder person? So I was like thinking a little bit and told that person that being a good listener, thinking from the middle, put yourself in the middle. Don't take one side or the other, like put yourself in the middle. And never vote on the same way you would maybe possibly vote. Like think of the 23,000 people we represent. I know we all represent districts, but you represent all Watertown. No preconceived notions. Have a level head, willing to change your mind, and to lead from your heart. We were passing a chicken ordinance. I went drove to Fort Atkinson because a person I worked with, we were going to decide we had 4 chickens. I know it passed later on, you can have 3. That's one thing, things with animals always create big discussions in this room. Taking a picture with chickens. I remember Tony kind of yelling like they can't reply all on that. And so, I don't know if you remember that email, Fred. That was quite a while ago, but I always investigated and thought things through a little bit. That's actually why I ran in the first place for this position. Oh, sorry, that position now. Got a picture of a family in front of you. At first, under restraints, I was kind of against it. And then one of our meetings in June, three of you kind of spoke up. Maybe this was the year. I actually thought next year would be the year to possibly do that, to reset things. But I listened to Fred, and I've been going to different churches. I was at First Baptist Church this past yesterday, because I learned that from you, Fred. You came to my church when I was like 14, I think, a Good Shepherd, and Pastor Schwant was there. But the last couple of years, I found myself like stopping at a grocery store, being in a library, being in a park, and watching families. Thinking, how can I help them? How can I make their lives better? So I challenge you to go dispatch. I was actually open originally. We had no discussion today. I wanted you guys to actually think about it, and I will too. What's the best thing to do? First work day for kids or for teachers. That was my first time not having a first day of school for 26 years. Probably really rough on me next week, Tuesday, when school actually starts up. Yeah. We gotta get these mics fixed. This job was completely off my radar a couple of years ago. And Fred, you're one of the first people I told. I think you were number 7. It wasn't related to, actually, but I'm looking where Mark always said. I talked to Mark quite a bit on Saturday. I talked to Steve Zagans on Friday, before you did, Ken. I think of John, how he would vote on something. He always would think. Right in the middle, go one way or the other. Visit dispatch, do a ride along with the cops. Go to the fire station, talk to the firemen for a little bit. Find that family that's hurting, and think to yourself, what's the best thing to do for the city? I will adjust myself too. I thought talking about staying on restraints was today my presentation. You tell me what you think privately, and how about in 2 weeks? A little PowerPoint on what we go off it, what that looks like too, and exact numbers. It's been 13 years since I spoke on this microphone. Sorry, 11. Yeah. All right, I'm back. So I thought first I wanted you guys to think a little bit too, but any questions? Mr. Berg, go ahead, sir.
Robert, again, I think everybody on this council is working as hard as we can to help you become successful as our mayor, but also for our city. I think we all come from different backgrounds, and I have been involved in city government for over 18 years. So I have a very deep appreciation for the work that people do. I also have a respect and an appreciation for being one of 9 on this council. And I take that job real serious as far as my duties. And I want to be as supportive as I can on the issues that come in front of our finance and our council, because that is the right thing to do. But it doesn't always mean going.
Mr. Berg, and I was just hoping, I didn't mean to sway anything. I honestly just wanted the four of you to
Yeah,
kind of just think on your own.
yeah. So just in closure
Yeah,
then,
Go ahead, Mr. Bird.
I'm only asking that we give some time to this, potential, of revenue that we weren't previously looking at as a way of giving us dollars we didn't, initially plan for. And if there's a pattern and it's consistently there, and it means that those dollars could be reallocated in a way that they are not being used now, then I think we have at least the beginnings of some dollars that can help us prioritize the most important things so that that 607,000 plus what we might be able to also have becomes a bigger number for us to address some of the needs for next year's budget. And Mark, I'm sure will do his due diligence over a 3-year period and give us some reassurance of a pattern that we can actually use for budgeting. And if it's significant, let's use that number. And then let's just see if it helps bridge some of the differences that we currently have. But I'm on the side of being sympathetic to a lot of these issues, but I don't feel I have any obligation to buy into all of them.
Mr. Berg, I just asked everybody to go right in the middle and then decide which way you want to go.
Right.
So I said I'd do the same thing. Fred said last resort, once we said last Tuesday. And I'll listen to my mentor. I think the council wants us to make a decision. Because that council split. Because I talked to all of them. And some didn't say anything. And the last thing we need to do is pass something 5-4 before 5. The 5 of us need to be in sync on something, okay? Mr. Lampy.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the questions I've been fielding frequently is essentially what structurally is driving us to this? And I think as you look at potential revisions to presentations out to the community or Watertown TV presentations, this might be the type of thing to focus on. But essentially, we're looking at right now about a 4% wage increase. Well, we are looking at a 4% wage increase as it applies to the fire department. We have in our budgets, of course, assumed that history will hold and that the fire department will soon be in a similar contract moving forward. We also have the wage study, which was a major thing that we had concentrated on in 2025. And we were given 2 numbers by finance to focus on, sort of option 1 and option 2 at 3.7%. And then the higher number that was cited tonight at the 10.86. So even at the 3.71, we basically have a budget collision between wage necessities that are coming in the high 3%, and then we have the expenditure restraint coming in at the 2.62%. There just isn't enough money to cover that. And I think the alarm was sounded by finance in the very first report we got all the way back in June. And that's the one that I keep referring to as the June 19th report, where we did budget for 4% for our public safety services. We did budget for the 3.71, but looking at all of those costs, and before we got into anything other than a zero budget increase for all other costs, we were looking at about $300,000 in personnel cuts in the first look back in June 19th. So it became pretty obvious that we were in trouble, at least in terms of employee headcount at that point. In further discussions, we said that we would like to identify at least 200,000, or different numbers are thrown around, but between 100,000 and 200,000 of essentially non-negotiable costs, software licenses, equipment renewals, just all of those other costs, which I do believe is a realistic way to budget. And that would push basically the personnel contribution, basically the reduction in headcount, the reduction in valuable positions to about $500,000 coming forward in the budget. Now we have a couple of options to get out of that. And one was, as cited tonight, I have colleagues who are very interested in looking at a more aggressive structural vacancy number. And one of the numbers cited tonight was 550 if we went with about 3%. But even that number would basically get us back to par on, let's say that we implemented that whole thing. Okay, great. We wipe out the $500,000 in the budget. But we also are not covering here is any of the new positions that, one of them I've essentially fought for now for 3 years, and that was the additional fire chief. As the fire chief cited here, the department's calls are mostly EMS at this point, and we don't have dedicated personnel to deal with that. We also have a downtown that continues to be lucky that it doesn't suffer a major mishap, which the fire marshal would behave at. So there is a lot of value to that incremental position. And the fire department, I think we do realize that the paperwork required has come at us snowballing, certainly over the last half decade or so. And that's a position that we have also highlighted, and I know the mayor has highlighted on his list. We have that one to look at too. And we also have just gotten done through finance talking about the problem that is the reoccurring IT turnover. And while I can't say this is my favorite solution to the problem, it's a very good solution to offload a lot of the ticket-based activity onto somebody who can actually handle it. And if you've been to a couple of our recent meetings, including a finance meeting, there's opportunities for IT to help out as well. So all that is to say is that, to me, the only realistic way to essentially reindex to this wage study, which has essentially been promised to employees for the past couple of years, and bring on the positions needed for those new priorities in fire, police, and IT, would be to leave the expenditure restraint program, which is why I've been in favor of doing exactly that for months now, all the way back to June when, again, those stark numbers hit our page.
Thank you, Mr. Lampy. Okay. So yeah, go ahead, Ms. Davis.
I'll reiterate that I am interested in what we discussed earlier about investigating a percentage of budgeting decrease in the salaries to see if that would help us gain any ground in meeting expenditure restraint. But all along the way, I've also expressed that I would be curious to see the numbers. What does this mean? If we were to depart from expenditure restraint, what does it mean for this year? How much would come out of the fund balance? And what would be the impact to the taxpayer? That's really significant to me because I hear the need, and it's been very, we've used a lot of emotional language tonight and appeal, and I hear that, I understand that. But we also have to consider the taxpayers that are on fixed budgets, and we're all related to them, and maybe very much are aware of how another increase to their taxes is very challenging for them. So obviously, this is very difficult. But before I can go any further in endorsing eliminating expenditure restraint I need to see both sides of the ledger, and I haven't seen that yet.
Ms. Davis, I think when I had my presentation Tuesday, I had numbers based on all the houses going up for 2027, but we didn't talk about how much is going to be taken out of the fund balance exactly.
I want to know for this year, how much is coming out of fund balance, and what would that mean on the other side for taxes? I find it difficult to reconcile all the total compensation plus the add of 3, 4 people, plus the increases that are going to be necessary just because things go up. And so I need to see the numbers before I can endorse that or go any further in an endorsement to that.
Okay. That was hopeful, having 2 weeks for our next meeting. Mr. Lampy?
I do want to reiterate Alder Davis's request for that against fund balance. The one pager we got tonight, the 821 estimate, basically talks about essentially another hole that we would have to fill to fund the positions I had just talked about in this. However, that doesn't necessarily come with it, the black and white determination of what that actually does to fund balance and what the projected tax impact would be. And I think that that information would be extraordinarily valuable, not only at finance, but if we were to try to move something forward into council.
I put a couple of those positions, even a regular officer, because I thought you guys find ways that you can reallocate funds that you knew how much they cost. So there's 4 positions that I showed you that wasn't to have all 4, but just wanted you guys to have those numbers. Okay. Good, Fred? What about Mr. Smith?
I appreciate the comments that others have made, and I'm not going to somehow try to reiterate that. I've been approaching this from the perspective of this being a difficult budget year. The fact that each one of us have responsibilities to help create an effective budget for 2026. Each of us have the responsibility of recognizing that we are also here to represent those who are paying the taxes that allow us to move forward as a city, and to respect them in their position. And kind of picking up on your down the middle approach, if we don't keep the taxpayers of our community well within view and recognize that everybody isn't wealthy. Lots of people in this city are living on a very tight personal budget. And if we don't keep them in mind, and we somehow think that they will be perfectly happy to pay whatever freight comes down the road, regardless how much a particular budget is tilted in the direction of more spending instead of more efficiencies, then I believe we will have lost the balance approach that will allow us to represent the community in a balanced way. And there's one other thing that I want to put out there. I do not believe that we are looking only at the 2026 budget. I'm concerned of how does each of our successive budgets impact the financial future of the community. And for instance, I'm very concerned at the notion of taking our very favorable fund balance and spending it down to a midpoint of our identified range, and doing that with those expenditures being recurring expenses. Because to the extent that's the case, it's going to have an impact on future year budgets. And I believe the idea of those promoting leaving the expenditure restraint program for 1 year is the notion that we will get back on expenditure restraint in future years. That very premise is based on the fact that we recognize that there is a benefit to being on expenditure restraint, not just the revenues that accrue, which in some instances are around $500,000, but that the very process of qualifying helps us to be dedicated to the most efficient provision of government services that we can. That's how we stay within the constraints of expenditure restraint. And while we may very well want to be open-minded on the notion of a 1-year departure, one thing I'm going to have to be absolutely certain of is the long-term consequences of the decisions we make, not just leaving expenditure restraint, but how the decisions made to fund leaving expenditure restraint will impact future years, and whether or not we can categorically say that we have a plan in place that, notwithstanding leaving expenditure restraint within the parameters of specific budget goals, will absolutely allow us the financial capacity to return to that expenditure restraint program in future years. I haven't seen any information relating to that. And then lastly, because I'm concerned about how we would use the fund balance, which undoubtedly is a favorable factor that we need to use wisely this year, I'm very suspect of using a significant amount of that fund balance excess for recurring expenses. And one thing I haven't heard much about is this does provide us an opportunity to fund some capital projects that otherwise would not be funded. It's not going to happen in the normal course of our annual budget considerations. And if we have the kind of fund balance that we're talking about, we have an opportunity, for instance, to make a dent in the deficit that accrues each year in keeping up with our streets. We have a huge number of city streets. Every year we analyze the lineal footage that we are addressing in that year's budget. We know what the life expectancy is of an asphalt street, of a concrete street, and so forth. And there is absolutely no question at the amount of street work that we're funding with 100% borrowing on our capital budgets of roughly $4 million, we are falling behind in those areas that maybe don't appear to be huge deficits at any given point in time, but left in place. And if we fail to meet the average needful expenditure for those streets by 5,000 feet a year or whatever, and that continues year after year after year, we are digging ourselves into a hole that will make it so difficult that we will have a dreadful time ever catching up. And what I'm saying is one-time expenditures funded out of the fund balance are the kinds of things that don't come back to bite you in the future years, as the continuing expenditures very likely could. So those are things I'm concerned about. Not only this year's budget, but how we use the fund balance, what our plan is for the fund balance, how, if we got off expenditure restraint, we can ensure our financial capacity to get back on expenditure restraint in the next year, and doing all of these things and being able to prioritize the needs that we have been extensively discussing, the pay study, the big ticket items, the new hires, all of those things, because this is a big picture that needs to be addressed from the broad perspective. And underwriting all of that is the recognition that we are not only the representative for our city's future and moving forward in a wise financial manner, but keeping in mind the taxpayers all along the way.
Mr. Smith, you had mentioned once about giving some of it back to the taxpayers. Would you want some for roads and some for taxpayers? I gave a plan to in 2 weeks.
Well, I had certainly thought about that. I think that I think we need to see the numbers that we have in terms of spending capacity, not under the expenditure
So I had a
restraint.
plan for only taking a little bit out, but if you want to take more out for roads or whatever projects we need, did you want to see some go back to the taxpayers? Because you mentioned that to me, I have two aldermen that wish to do that, so I'm asking you, would you like to see some money allocated to roads and some given back to taxpayers?
Well, the issue becomes, how do you do that? How do you give it back to the taxpayers? And if we're talking about the indirect approach, which is keeping a reasonable limit on increased taxation, in other words, using part of that to defray what would have been a much larger than normal tax rate increase, that's something that can certainly be talked about. I don't think that there is any specific manner in which we could draw down the fund balance for a certain amount and then cut pro rata checks based on valuation or whatever it would be. It just seems tremendously cumbersome. I think what we have is we have an opportunity to do the kinds of things that are very low visibility, but from the broad perspective of concerns that the citizenry has, there's probably nothing that comes up more often than the deteriorating condition of city streets. So I think that my view of approaching the fund balance, especially in light of all of the things that we're looking at now, is to do our best to use them for one-time expenditures and heavily weight that towards increased mileage in our city street maintenance budget.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Lampy, you have your hand up?
I did. I am also concerned about the future budget. I think this is not really tipping our hand here, but we basically have a 1-year fire contract. And so it behooves us to make sure, I think as a finance committee, that we have a 1-year police contract. So that as we look at expenditure restraint in future years, we absolutely have to take into account inflation as where we're going to essentially index all of our employee expenditures in the future. One other thing that struck me, and I apologize if I'm mischaracterizing this a little bit, but I also want to understand from our finance department the degree to which we essentially can put some additional expense in a budget that has expenditure restraint, whether that's roads or whether that's something that's non-personnel. Is that a strategy that helps us mitigate against increased wages as we continue along the expenditure restraint program and have additional pressure from the 75% component that is wages?
Any dollar that is spent out of the general fund is counted as an expense. So to take money sitting in the bank and say, let's solve the problem of our roads is not something I can do. Because any dollar spent is included in the category of expenses. And I confirmed that with Wisconsin DOR a week or two ago. There is no definition of capital expenditure that is excluded from the total that is to be spent. They just have one line, I total everything. What is your total expense? That's the budgeted, approved budget that's published in the paper. That's the number that has to be used to them. So spending an extra whatever towards roads, if it comes out of the general fund, is included in that one number that's reported to the DOR.
I don't think you're really answering my question on this one. This pertains to the effects really of changing the allocation between wages and non-wage expenses in a budget that gets re-indexed under expenditure restraint. Under a budget that gets re-indexed in that manner, and let's say again, we came up with a plan of essentially putting some non-personnel expenditures, whether they're roads or other things that we think are crucial in the year 2026. We have the wherewithal, I believe, to then, it's the overall budget number that gets re-indexed. It doesn't necessarily get down to the level of wages versus other Fund 1 expenditures. It's the whole budget that gets re-indexed, which is why I'm interested in, potentially overspending on roads or other non-recurring, if that is an effective strategy to mitigate against wage increases in future years while we're underneath expenditure restraint.
The non-personnel expenses have very little capital definition. There's about $150,000 maybe out of the $21 million that would be properly defined as capital expenditures. So I don't have much to move there. I mean, I'll put it this way, if we move something there, let's say purchase of a $2,500 piece of IT equipment that has a 4-year life, we're going to be borrowing money for 8 years to pay for that 4-year life. And that's where we have auditor approved definition for what is our capital expenditure. I don't have something in general fund to move.
Yeah.
We're not buying vehicles out of the general fund. We're not buying anything greater than $10,000 out of the general fund, any one particular anything.
So I appreciate that perspective, and I'm worried that what's being posited as a possible use of Fund 1 dollars in roads may not be something that is possible. And I really think we need to work through a clear answer as to whether or not that's really on the table or not.
Ms. Davis, go ahead.
Meeting in 2 weeks and meeting in 2 weeks. What are we expecting to see at the meeting in 2 weeks?
Exactly how much to take out of the fund balance to not put any burden on the taxpayers. And
2 weeks where we see a comparison contrast. Here's what will happen if we go this way. Here's what will happen if we go this way. I would love to see that. I'm ready to see, show me what the options.
okay. I can give you some thoughts I had for things to change if we are staying on it. And we work with Mr. Stevens and come up with some visuals that could be sent to you before our meeting.
That'll be helpful.
Yeah. Mr. Berg.
Yeah, one of the things, when we looked into that Department of Revenue on the idea of capital expenditures, they indicated they counted anything over a year as being a long-term type of expenditure that would allow for it to be counted as an improvement. We did one-time improvements on roads. We spent $1 million hypothetically, and we borrowed that money and we paid it back in 13 months using our fund balance. That would be one way of targeting that fund balance for a purpose like streets, if that were a high priority, and yet be counted as a long-term expenditure because of being longer than 1 year. That's one approach that could address an obvious need. We have 125 miles of streets in our town, and there's clearly a need to be more aggressive somehow on that topic to give a better look on maintenance of our streets in town. So I like that idea, and I'm still on board with the idea of Mark Stevens doing his homework, coming back as soon as he can with a report telling us if there's any reliability on using these dollars that we haven't been using under personnel based on a different approach. With 100% versus 97% or some percentage that makes sense based on looking at 3 years of expenditure and coming up with an average that seems to be reliable. We could count those dollars as new revenue And that in addition to the 607,000, that in addition to the new shared revenue that we're going to be able to project for additional dollars of 140,000, it's given us 750,000 of new money for next year to use in counting our priorities for expenditure, along with what might be new revenue we weren't counting before on this topic of employees and how they're in the budget being counted versus the reality of expenditure year after year with some type of predictability. Those dollars are going to be over $1 million. And if they're over $1 million, then we prioritize the over $1 million that we have. And we then, pick and ask ourselves, is that doable for next year? Because if we get past this year for 2026, we have a fairly high increase in insurance. I mean, every year could be the same, but it also could be less. We could have an easier time next year if we get past this year somehow with the approach we're trying to suggest as a remedy for this year. I'm open to anything as a way of addressing our problems here. I don't know if we want to keep waiting 2 more weeks. If there's some way that we get new information and our finance director is confident in the numbers, if we can somehow get new information quicker and be able to address it as one person, I'm available to meet sooner.
I agree, Mr. Berg. I'm getting a little nervous about the timeline here. I thought we would accomplish more this evening, and we've had good discussion, and that's important. But I would make it work. It's a challenging time of year, but I'd make it work if we needed to meet next week.
Go ahead, Mr. Lampy.
I hate to keep banging this drum, but I'm still confused about the concept of paying more for roads as it has anything to do with expenditure restraint. Because we normally pay for roads out of Fund 5 and the capital project and the borrowing. And we keep talking about potentially paying for roads out of Fund 1, and I don't understand the intersection.
I don't think that's what we're proposing. And the hypothetical that I tried to present as a concept at the last council meeting was that if indeed we had the overage of fund balance that produced 1.6 million in nominal dollars to return us to the 25% midpoint range. And that $1.6 million was something that, as we've discussed it and we establish priorities, let's hypothetically say we decide we want to spend that whole $1.6 million on more city streets in 2026. And because debt is exempt from expenditure restraint, and if we have a regular borrowing year of, let's say, $4 million, that we then borrow $5.6 million, as soon as that definition of long-term expenditure is met, and that at the 13-month point, with a borrowing instrument that allows no prepayment of penalty, we go ahead and take the 1.6 million out of fund balance, pay the debt instrument down in prepayment. It's completely off the expenditure restraint formula, and it is qualified expenditure and does not burden us with excessive debt beyond that minimum period of time. I think the issue for us is assessing how much of the fund balance we want to use, what that translates to in nominal dollars, because we're talking about reaching a percentage of that undesignated fund balance. I'm interested in being certain what that nominal amount of dollars would be, have the discussion and say, okay, do we spend 100% of it on one-time capital expenditures? Do we allocate it 25% to recurring expenditures, whatever, so that we know what we're dealing with. Then we can begin to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Right now, we're talking about an awful lot of things without a formal understanding of the either short-term or long-term financial implications of that, and it makes it very hard to make wise decisions that way.
Okay, I think Mr. Smith, you put some more ideas in my head too. So I said I would join the four of you and like just start over and see what's best.
Well, let's meet next week if we have to, whatever.
I'm gonna be back east with my niece's
So-
wedding, and I'm not gonna be here next week.
So I gave you guys, well, somebody in the packet too, some things you can look at. So we'll get things to you ahead of time before next finance meeting. Mr. Lampy.
So the other things so we received a little bit of information in the packet. That was the one pager I referred to. We got three things at least at our desks here. So we had an org chart. Then we have a list of folks who are in the various departments with blue stars next to them. So, and then we also got a list of possible cuts. So I'd like a tour of these and understand what their significance is.
Tour of.
Yes, why do we have a packet of the org chart and
So the org chart just, they had all the employees on there too. The ones that were, some elders asked about maybe some of the newer positions in the past. So I just highlighted the newer positions that have been brought up in the last couple of years.
okay.
And then you had all names, just, I know I've gotten to know a lot of the names here of people, but that was just for your information. So you maybe knew how many people in each department. So originally I just asked doing the org chart and then somebody did a little extra work and got done with the pictures too. So it's kind of had the org chart was just made for you and then someone made the one with the pictures. So if you understand the staff, you see them, how they relate to each department.
Was this in reaction to a question from finance as to who our most recent hires were? Or is this,
Yeah, it might have been a council meeting too.
okay. The possible cuts one is also interesting to me too, because I think if we look at the possible cuts here, it's shy of a few I think we've chatted about formally or informally.
Yeah. This idea, and I gave you a printout of everything from the fund on balance, so that was for you to look and you can see, and as I said before, looking for your leadership as well too. So I mean, I would open any ideas. So I thought you guys individually look at it and that would be right now, but that we had the information. And I believe the fund one was in the packet, but I know that maybe having the paper copied, so
We had
I paid 25 cents a sheet for each one of those for you guys, so.
the one that I saw in the packet was the 821
Yeah, right.
piece, and I don't know if anything else was in here. But if you're taking possible cuts, I think the finance committee would love to opine on that as well.
We need to do it together, so. Okay. All right, I can entertain a motion to adjourn then? I'm sorry, is that you, Mr. Berg?
No, okay, so we're saying that, this information that we're gonna get from our finance director is gonna occur, but we're not gonna maybe meet for 2 weeks on the topic. So,
I think we can try to get some stuff to you before that too. Not tomorrow, but
yeah.
that
okay.
way, I think, yeah, and be honest with you, listening to the four of you today gives me some ideas as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Um,
I need your help on it too.
Well, yeah, and you did identify, I thought, some potential cuts, which you're working on for your executive budget, but you had mentioned, I thought, through Park and Rec and Streets that there were a couple of positions you might have found that might have had savings.
There's things I'm looking all over the place. I mean, even our
But
just.
they're not on this sheet. You gave possible cuts here, but they're not referenced.
Well, I don't know, so things that change, yeah. And
Well-
other expenditures that we have that maybe can be placed somewhere else, which I think I listed some of
Yeah.
those, so. That was just some ideas. I want you to look through the whole Fund One and you give me some ideas too.
Oh.
And I'm joining you, we're right in the middle, I'm gonna see what's best for myself too, okay?
There are also a number of ideas that were part of the PowerPoint presentation for which we have hard copies. I mean, probably 5 or 6 of those pages address specific ideas, not being advocated, but just options. These are things that could be looked at.
Yeah.
And I-
They're not here.
I
They're
It
not-
it
The one
would
for-
be helpful for all of them to be identified in a single.
Do you mean my PowerPoint from last Tuesday, Mr. Smith?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I sent that, I can resend it if you want, it's got a lot of options.
No, I have that whole one. It's just what I'm saying is that out of, 20, almost 30 pages, maybe a third or a quarter of them were addressing issues
Mhm.
where this is a possible cut
Yeah.
and thrown out as an idea for consideration. And I'm saying that
And
all that was very helpful.
Yeah.
appreciate that.
And I think that the points he's making there on potential areas that we could look at, they can be combined with what you're suggesting here as ideas. But as one person, I am not clearly in favor of this RDA position of, we need economic development in Watertown in a bad way. We need a person with a background like Mason Becker and the person before him. That position is gonna pay for itself times 10 in a way of creating additional tax base and bringing in the possibility of new development and businesses and people. So we need an advocate, and I'm on the RDA. And without a person there, you're reliant on people that are part-time. We go there and we do our part as members of RDA, but we need a full-time person.
So that person, Mason didn't take insurance, so you're gonna have to add another 20 grand to that.
Yeah,
And if you,
right.
like I mentioned before, if you want to add money somewhere else, it's gotta come from somewhere. So, there again, that stuff, I wanted this for you
Yeah.
to absorb on your own. So remember that if we spend money
Yeah.
somewhere, it's gotta be taken somewhere else. All right,
These ones that were highlighted on that one sheet you handed out with in blue, new positions last 6 years. I left in 2019. So you're saying everyone that's highlighted in blue?
well, except we had 3 firemen added, so I just picked
Okay.
3 on there. I think one of them,
No, I'm not targeting this individual as being anybody to be looking at in any
Mr.
critical way.
probably not discussion.
But I'm saying that Maureen McBroom was a new position after I left because I went.
You know what, you're right, I forgot to add that one.
Okay,
You're
that's a
correct.
new
Yep.
position.
I missed that, yep. Sorry.
And there's also a difference in your various employees as it relates to what fund they're being paid out of. I mean, it's going to be an enterprise fund. I believe that she's the stormwater utility.
Well, I think,
Employee.
Mr. Bergman, I just forgot to
Yeah.
make that one blue, but.
So,
All right.
you know,
Mhm. Okay. Mr. Lampy,
So for additional ideas on where to cut, where should we submit them?
should email me
Will do.
or reach out to me through phone. If you have a good idea, please let me know, okay?
And Mark, you feel you can give us an update pretty soon on that topic that we talked about?
Not yet this week, but
Okay.
it'll be next week.
Entertain a motion to adjourn then?
I've got just one
I'm
more.
sorry, and then Mr.
definition,
Lampier
just to
too.
make sure. That Mr. Smith's idea of the add it to 13 months interrupts a different formula that needs to be calculated, and that's your overall tax levy. The tax levy is defined as what you need for your Fund One and your debt. So increasing to be a 13-month borrow still has an impact on your debt levy, which is part of the tax levy calculation. So I don't have an ability to fool the state and say, well, we're gonna borrow it for 13 months and not impact the tax levy. The tax levy has to be adequate to fund that next year's principal and interest in its entirety.
But then 13 months later, when you get a new tax levy, you're gonna be, it's gonna get paid down by that amount that we actually borrow in that 13 months. So it's gonna have a new number. The next time you do, no, it'll be 2 years late because it actually is gonna take 2 years for it to be recognized in your new debt levy amount, because it's gonna be paid down in the meantime by that amount.
So it's okay to increase everybody's tax bill for a year because I have to include it
Right.
in the calculated
Right.
tax levy.
Right.
So whatever year you borrow it is the year I have to include it in the calculated tax levy total.
Yeah.
So if you want to spend more in debt pay down, that increases the debt levy in that year.
For that year, but it's gonna show a reduction when we pay it down.
So you want to double or triple the tax levy for 1 year? And then the next year? I have to put it on, if you pay it 100% down in any 12 months, that year, your taxes have to go up.
Yeah, right.
Mr. Lampy.
Not necessarily my position, but I think I'm going to try to represent what Alder Smith was saying here, which is that essentially if we would normally levy for, let's say, 5 million in debt for a year, but we have available fund balance, is there a mechanism by which we could use our Fund One balance to address Fund Five as basically to reduce that levy for a particular year? Was that what you were putting forward?
Right. In other words, it would be anticipated for rapid payoff. Even though we might borrow 4 million on a 10-year loan, it would be noted that we would be paying off the additional borrowing as soon as that was possible, and that would be factored into the scheduling of the debt and interest payments in future years. In other words, it wouldn't be all amortized over 10 years or whatever the bonding period would be. And if that were factored in advance, and from the borrowings we've done in the past, it has been structured in ways that is more favorable to level out or to target payments for a particular timeline. So my thinking on the matter is that that amount that was added to the borrowing, which was intended to be ultimately funded by payments from the fund balance, were things that would be factored into the repayment schedule, even though the annual borrowing, let's say additional 4 million, would be amortized over a longer period of time.
So to summarize the question, can we use Fund One balance to subsidize Fund Five capital borrowing?
Without impacting the tax levy. Because the tax levy is defined as the total of both general operations and debt. The two have to be added together in order to figure out what the mill rate is for that year.
Ms. Davis.
Back to the salary and funding just a percentage of the salaries. So that would entail figuring out what 100% is, adding on the pay increase, and then taking a percentage of it. And so let's just say 95% of that total. So the question is there any problem with purposefully underfunding? And then does that still qualify for ERP if you have to take out a fund balance? So 95% of the salaries would be funded for expenditure.
Yeah, as long as we follow what our printed budget is, we're fine with that. I did ask a follow-up question to DOR about that very topic. A different alder through to me has suggested, for instance, what if we planned on a bonus?
Mhm.
Okay, so we come to an end of a year and we decide we've got available money, so let's add it as a bonus.
Doesn't work.
Well, there's two parts against that. One, it's way over your budget that's printed, so I'd have to explain to the state, why did we do that? And secondly, it would be a one-year fix, because then that would become the expected next year's total. And also, I don't think it would be a long-term solution,
Right.
and it's hard to,
But you're not penalized for having a budget and then having to tap into fund balance because you came under
correct.
or you didn't have,
No,
you're not
if
penalized. by
if that was scheduled, it was scheduled this year.
Yeah.
We scheduled it
year.
last year.
Every year we plan to do
Yep,
that.
so
Yep.
as long as that's part of the printed budget that's been approved,
Yeah.
then
I
no,
would
you
really-
can tap into it.
I am really curious about that.
Yeah.
If,
So
I'm curious
I
to
think I mean, to make it easy is plan on reducing it by reducing your mill rate by tapping more into the fund balance.
Hmm.
You know, that would be, if you will, your way of giving back to the taxpayer
sure.
by reducing it that way.
Motion adjourned
Make a
then?
motion that we adjourn,
Okay.
Mayor Smith, Mayor.
Mayor Smith, it's been a
Mayor-
couple
Mayor
years.
Stocks. It's been too long now.
Motion by Berg,
Second.
second by Lampy. Usually jumps faster than that. Okay. Any discussion on that?
No.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Night, everyone.
So what do you, help you with your?